So here is a mad scientist prop that I built several months ago. I thought I got some video of it. I actually have some airlines going into the tubes, but I didn't get any video. I didn't really plan to do a how-to, but I'm making a new one, so that's why I'm posting this video. But I will get some video of this particular one in action and kind of give you a tour of how I made everything. But to make a mad scientist panel, you're going to want to use, LED lights and gauges and meters, and I recommend that you get a DC power supply if you don't have one. I use this all the time when building props. It's very beneficial. This is the sheet steel that I used for the face of the panel. I just cut everything out with a jigsaw, then sanded everything on the back, and then added my own patina. So, and this is the back of it. But I want to make a new one for this year, and this is my layout, so let's get started.
The first thing I do is I buy some backer material. I've used wood before, but I like using metal just because you can get a really cool patina on it if you rust the steel yourself. So this is a sheet of 22 gauge sheet steel. And what I do is I just find what components I have on hand, or maybe I'll go to eBay and just find some old voltage meters or amp meters or gauges, and then vintage lights. You can find them all the time on eBay. Sometimes you can get them for a really good deal. These are actually boiler room or a boiler panel lamps, and they're vintage and they look really old and they have a nice patina on them. They're 120 volt, which is one of the reasons why I chose to use sheet steel, because they do get really hot. Otherwise I could have used plywood or something. But I'm going to put switches on here too. And then I found these are old instrument panel lamps. This one's red, this one's a green. And I got four of these for about $15. And this is just a little valve gate. It's not totally 3D, but then you can use any type of spacer. I'm just going to use a piece of PVC adapter just to offset that. Anytime you can get depth, it's going to make your mad scientist panel look even cooler. So from here, we'll make a frame. We'll make a wooden frame, and then we'll cut out all of the holes. You can use regular drill bits, or you can use a step bit, or believe it or not, you can use a bimetal bit for some of these gauges. I've actually cut holes out using a jigsaw before with a metal cutting blade, and it works fine. It just kind of takes a while. These are a lot easier if you have them on hand. I just try to collect them, and every time I need a different size, I'll buy one and just hang on to it. But that's it for now. I'm going to cut all of my holes, finalize my layout, and then once I do that, I'll show you how I do the patina on the metal.
Okay, let's talk power for a second. Remember I said it's beneficial to have a DC power supply? You can use it to test your lights. You can use it to play with different voltages to get the right look, especially when you're building props like this. So for this particular prop, I do want to put some lighting in at least one of the gauges, but I'm not going to use LED because it's hard to get that antique look from an LED light. So I'm going to use incandescent bulbs. They're 16 volt. The company that makes them is called Miniatronics, and I've just drilled a hole through the bottom, 2 holes actually, and I just run the lights up, and I hot glued it right below the glass there. And this is what the bulb looks like. You can find them online or in any railroad hobby supply shop. And this is what the gauge looks like when it's all lit up. And again, that's why it helps having that power supply, because you can find out what voltage gives you the right look. And I actually use a couple of different sources of power on my props, and this particular one I'll use a 12 volt, and I will also use an 18 volt for the 4 amber LEDs or amber incandescent bulbs, and then naturally I need 120 volts alternating current for those big panel lights that I got on eBay for $9, by the way. So what I normally do is I just run the 120 voltage to the back of the panel, and I normally put a power strip in there, and that way I can just plug in different cheap wall warts with different voltages to connect to the different banks of light. And a little secret on buying wall warts or power adapters: go to a secondhand store or like a Goodwill store, and they normally sell them for $1 each. And I buy as many as I can find. So I normally have at least 10 of them on hand of different voltages, 5 volts, 9 volts, 12 volts, and I use them in all kinds of different props. And they're a lot better than using batteries because if you forget about the batteries and you're storing your stuff throughout the year, they can leak. And using wall warts is just the way to go, and it's super cheap. Okay, to make the frame, I just used a scrap piece of 3/4 inch plywood that I had. To make the channel for the sheet metal to fit into, I just did one pass on the table saw, so it's just a saw blade width apart. And then on the back, notice that I cut a rabbet joint, again using the table saw, just in case I wanted to recess a back panel on this thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to put one on there or not.
Alright, now all the holes are cut in the panel. All I need to do now is clean the surface and then sand it. Then it'll be ready to rust. I've just used Windex to clean the surface and I sanded it. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to clean it again with Windex, and then I can spray on the rusting solution. This is the patina on the metal. It's how it turned out. All I've done is, again, clean the surface with Windex, then I sanded it with just a kind of a fine grit sandpaper using an orbital sander. Then I cleaned it again with Windex to get the grease and any metal bits off of it. And then I just sprayed it down with a spray bottle using white vinegar, white household vinegar. That was it. I didn't mix in any salt. I didn't throw salt on the surface at the end. And I didn't use any hydrogen peroxide. You could certainly use those techniques, but I was blown away at how organic this came out. So I like it. I'm just going to leave it like that. And I'm actually, this is the top of the panel, but when I go on the other side, the lighting wasn't as good because the garage light is overhead. Anyway, I have one issue right now, and that is getting all of my sides to fit correctly. My top and bottom piece fit fine, but when I went to put my side pieces on, they're a little long. And the reason why they're long is my channel that I cut with the saw blade it's pretty deep, so which is no problem. All I need to do is cut these side pieces down, and I'll show you how to measure for that. You just flip it opposite, square it up to one end here, like so, and then I can mark the excess on this end. And just to give myself a little wiggle room, I won't cut it to all the way down to that, but after I mark it, I'll just be a little bit proud of the mark just to be on the safe side. So I'm going to mark it by just running a pen down here. I'm going to recut this on the miter saw, and I should be good to go. Alright, so I've cut the rails down to size a little bit better, and as you can see, the metal plate is completely in the groove, and I've got my framing square here. Everything's square, it looks good, so I'm just going to pop these off. I'll put a healthy bead of glue right here. I'll put it back on, and I'll drive 3 1.5-inch brads using a brad nailer. Okay, so it's all nailed together. I've double checked it for square. I just popped a nail on the top corners all the way around first and then flipped it over. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to hold the nailer parallel because the ground would be right here. It'd be up here, and it's important to get these corners. I just couldn't go too close here because the metal is down that reveal. But I'm going to let that dry up, and then I'll fill in stuff like this. I'm just going to use a little spackle or joint compound, and then I'll sand it. And I'm thinking of painting the frame like a silver, just a silver color, and I'll distress that just a little bit. And once that's done, I can spray a matte or satin lacquer if I want, if I don't want my finish to get messed up, and then I can install all of the gauges and everything. I still had a little bit of play in the metal, so what I did was I just threw a bead of caulking down against the wood, and I did that last night, so it's all dry. And I may need to take a grinder or some sandpaper just to knock down some of these edges on the backside, so my lights and any of my panels will sit flush. And I just threw some spackle. I just mixed up some 20-minute joint compound all across the face. Remember, this was plywood, and when you paint that, the wood grain is going to show through, so you don't want it to look like plywood, obviously. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some sandpaper. I'm just going to knock down these edges, sand it up a little bit, sand my nail holes, and then I'm going to paint the frame. Okay, so the panel has been all put together, framed. I painted the frame with, just threw some primer on there and then painted some silver. And then I used a satin polyurethane spray on the panel so the rust would not rub off, and this is what I used, Rust-Oleum. Dries very fast, so now I can actually put all my gauges and switches in.